Hey guys, what is up and welcome to a new League of Legends video. So it is that time once again to look at the upcoming patch coming to League of Legends in just a few days. And there are going to be quite a bit of things to talk about and cover for this specific video. So if you guys end up enjoying this video and you want me to continue doing this for every upcoming patch, let me know by simply hitting that like button. Without wasting too much more time, let's get right into the first big change coming to patch 7.2. So the first one and probably the biggest change is of course the Warwick rework. It should be coming up in the patch of 7.2, whether it's at the very beginning or maybe just a few days after. And I have made several videos showing you guys the new Warwick, some gameplay in the jungle, in the top lane, but if you haven't checked them out or you want sort of a quick rundown, then here it is. The new Warwick in terms of overall thematic and gameplay is still very similar to the old Warwick. The idea is similar, the playstyle is still very similar, and the concept of the champion and the mechanical skill required to play him is still quite minimal. But with that being said, he definitely feels more of a dynamic champion now, with his ult being a skill shot, his W giving him that new sort of really cool scent of blood and able to kind of chase people down a lot better, and also having an active effect. So if you want to kind of force the effect, you can do that, but the cooldown is very long and somewhat unforgiving. His Q ulti is also pretty cool because it has two different ways that you can use it, whether you just use it for the damage or using it for the damage plus also the new way to reposition yourself based on the situation that you're in. His E ability, which synergizes well with his Q, and his ultimate, which gives you sort of extra resistances and also fears the opponents, is also very cool. So again, at the end of the day, Warwick is still very much the same champion, but he just has a little more of different things he can do, much more of a dynamic gameplay. But when it comes to just simply picking him up and playing him successfully, you can probably still do that with the new Warwick. But investing much more time into him will definitely be much more rewarding than the current Warwick. Is he OP? Honestly, I don't think he is. I think he's good, I think he's pretty strong, but I don't think he's all that overpowered, unless of course you're just insanely ahead and fed, at which point probably almost any champion can be overpowered. But next up, let's talk about one of the first actual changes coming to patch 7.2 that's not related to something new coming out. So ever since lethality got introduced, which is essentially the new armor penetration stat, it's been somewhat underwhelming. I mean, it hasn't really lived up to the hype and it hasn't really been all that effective either. Well, Riot has noticed this and they're changing it very slightly in how it works. So if you are unaware, lethality is essentially the new armor penetration stat where it scales based on the level in the game. So it starts off weak at the beginning, but as the game progresses, it'll gradually get better and better and better. So on the live servers currently, you actually only get 40% of the lethality as armor penetration up front, and then the other 60% is given to you over the 18 levels based on your target's level. The new way it's going to be working now is instead it'll give you 60% up front while granting you the rest of the 40% over the 18 level. So it'll essentially just be better as you get it initially, and it'll feel more useful throughout the game, and it won't take as long to ramp up. So this plus two other item buffs that I'll talk about much later into the video are things I'm actually somewhat excited for, because I feel like they are some indirect buffs to Zed. Whether it's enough or whether it's a big buff is still yet to be determined, but it is still something. Following this, we also have a slight nerf happening to Ghost, the summoner spell. Currently, it still is going to be working 28 to 45% based on champion level in terms of how much movement speed it offers. The new Ghost is still pretty much the same thing, 28 to 45% based on champion level, but it now only gives it to you after accelerating for 2 seconds rather than just flat out instant right at that moment. Not necessarily the biggest nerf in the entire world, but it will dumb it down a little bit for champions like maybe Darius, for champions maybe like Hecarim, the ones that can really abuse it and just make it seem a little bit too strong. We also have some very quick and simple buffs happening to Akali, to which I'm actually very happy about, because I personally really like playing Akali in the current meta. But even with these buffs being said and done, there is still something else that's getting nerfed, which I'll talk about later on, which is going to be an indirect hit to Akali, or an indirect nerf, which kind of sucks. But regardless, the buff to Akali is as follows. The AP ratio on her ultimate has been increased by 10%. Now, honestly, 10% isn't really all that bad, especially on an assassin champion. That's actually somewhat generous. But again, before you guys get a little too kind of worked up over this buff happening to Akali, there is something else that's happening to Gunblade, which I'll talk about again later on in the video, that is an indirect nerf to Akali as well. So in my mind, this sort of is just to make up for that. But let's move into the next nerf that is happening for this patch, and it is to a champion that very much deserves it. Darius. Darius has been quite the annoying top laner for quite some time now. I mean, he's a champion where even if you make him fall behind, even if he becomes somewhat useless in the laning phase, once you get those two items, maybe Dead Man's Plate, Spirit Visage or something like that, chances are in teamfights, as long as he can land the Qs, he is still gonna be absolutely destroying everyone's face while tanking up the majority of the damage. Very, very difficult and annoying to deal with in certain situations. So the nerf is as follows. The Noxian might bonus AD from his passive has been lowered, though I have to say, really not all that significantly. So instead of going from 40 to 200 bonus AD offer from levels 1 to 18, instead now it's 30 to 200. I mean, not the biggest thing in the entire world, honestly, but I guess for the laning phase, it'll help a bit. On top of this, if Darius's Q hits you with the handle, which is not the outer part, but the inner part of his Q, the damage on that has been lowered to 35% from 50%. I'm not really sure how I feel about this because, personally to me, from my experience, if you ever get hit by the inner part of his Q, then chances are you're already good to go. It's not going to do that much damage, and you're probably going to be winning the trade. If you get hit by the outer part of the Q, then that's usually when you lose the trade regardless, so I don't really know how much of a difference this will make. I guess now if Darius really misses his Q, then it'll be that much worse for him, but I really don't know if they're hitting the right spots. But either way, those are the nerfs. But moving along to a buff happening to Gragas, a jungler that used to be very, very dominant and has sort of fallen out of flavor for several patches now, this buff might actually put him back into the spotlight or at least make him a bit more popular. First, his base armor has been increased by about 3. This is actually not that bad because it's all about the base armor when it comes for the early jungle clears. This is really, really important to come out of the jungle successfully and healthy. But to make things even better, Happy Hour, which is his passive, the heal on this has been increased to 6% from 4%, which is pretty damn useful, especially late on into the game when you have just so much maximum HP. I think this is going to be quite effective and to the point where I might even say a little bit too strong. Either way though, you don't ever know really for sure until you finally see it in game and just see it in action, so you can't really say for sure, but I feel like these buffs will definitely put Gragas slowly back into the spotlight. Next up, a very quick note to mention, Katarina did get some nerfs. Her Shunpo, the E ability, the AD ratio on this has been lowered down to 50% from 65%, so a total of 15%. I don't think this will completely destroy Katarina because I know also before they were planning on changing her E ability so you can't use the auto attack reset pattern for it, which I'm glad they chose not to do because I feel like that thing is hard to do, and if you do it successfully, you should be rewarded. But either way, Katarina is receiving a very slight nerf. Again, is it going to be the end of Katarina? No, probably not, but it will without question lower her power by just a bit. Alright, the next change is going to be one of the bigger ones coming for this patch and definitely a champion you will most likely have to start watching out for, Master Yi. So the changes are actually quite interesting, the first of which being to his double strike passive where it just works very similar to Lucian's passive where if the first strike of the two ends up killing the target, whether it's a minion, a champion, a monster in the jungle, the next auto attack instead of just auto whiffing will try to look for a new target. Now this is actually really good when it comes to jungle clearing because it makes it overall just easier to do, but this isn't the big change. The big one is to his W. It has gained a completely new effect, so whenever the W is active, it reads as follows. In addition, Master Yi will gain stacks of double strike and pause the remaining duration of Wuju style and Highlander, which is the E and R abilities, for each second that he channels his W. So in other words, the duration remaining on your E ability and your ultimate essentially just pause. They don't tick down anymore the second your meditate is active and for the duration that it is active for. And on top of this, he'll continue gaining stacks of double strike, which, I mean, it's pretty damn intense, I have to say. I'm really curious to see how this plays out, whether or not this makes Master Yi OP or not. I mean, I don't really know. This is just completely new. He's never had something like this before ever in his kit, so take it as you will, take it with a grain of salt. Is it OP? Is it not? I don't really know for sure, but I'm very excited to see it on the live servers. But following this, we also have some, what I believe to be a buff happening to Nidalee, more specifically to her W. But right before that, her base health has been increased to 540 from 511, which is actually pretty decent. I mean, 30 HP level 1, when you go for that first jungle clear, that's a decent amount of HP. That pretty much is a full free auto attack you can now take from a jungle monster, maybe even 2. But the changes to her W are as follows. They are now invisible, so think of them very similar to something maybe like a Teemo Shroom. They can be revealed, they can be destroyed, and melee attacks will kill it in 2 shots, while range attacks will kill it in 3 shots. You can only have an X amount of them placed at any single given time based on the level of Nidalee or the level of your champion. And on top of this, her E ability now just simply heals more as a base value. So I think the changes to her W are actually quite good and also very interesting. Now you're not just forced to put it in bushes all the time, you can put them essentially anywhere you want, and they will be revealed of course if they have the ward or if they have the sweeper going on or something like that. But again, the point is you have just much more flexibility with the traps. Moving along, we also have a nerf happening to Yasuo. I'm sure something that a lot of people are probably gonna be very happy about. So currently on Yasuo, you almost always want to max your E ability first. There's almost no reason not to max it first because of the bonuses that it offers compared to maxing your Q first. But Riot is aware of this and they want to try and lower the power on maxing his E first, especially in the laning phase, and the way they did that is as follows. The base damage on his E ability has been lowered by 10 at rank 1 and all the way by 50 at rank 5. 50, that's a lot of damage. But to try and compensate, it has now gotten a new 20% bonus AD ratio added to the ability. This, I'll tell you right now, will not make up for it. This will easily lower the power of his E ability in the laning phase. The bonus AD ratio is not increased by multiple casts of his E because obviously, if you know, using his E consecutively will essentially make it so that his E ability, the base damage, is doing more and more. So all in all, this is gonna definitely hit Yasuo's laning phase. It's gonna definitely hit the power on his E ability. It's gonna make you kind of start questioning whether or not you still want to max his E or do you just go ahead and max his Q. I don't really know for sure. If I had to guess, I'd probably still go for the E max just because, I mean, maxing his Q only grants you 20 bonus damage on the Q ability every single rank, and that's literally it, while maxing the E will still not only give you more bonus damage, but at the same time, it will also lower the cooldown on the ability itself and also how often you can use it on the same target. But this is all speculation. Again, I'm not entirely sure. Maybe maxing Q will become the better option, but the point is, the Samurai's laning phase has definitely been hit, and it's been hit at a decent level as well. Alright guys, now there's a few changes happening to some items that I also want to discuss, the first of which being two items, the two AD assassin ones, being Duskblade of Drakthar and Edge of Night. Duskblade of Drakthar, the passive effect where it gives bonus damage against enemy champions, has been increased to 75 from 50. Not the biggest thing in the entire world, but any little bit counts, especially when you combine it with Edge of Night where the cooldown has been lowered to 30 seconds from 45. Take those two things, plus with the change to the lethality stat, and suddenly, these items, especially on assassins like Zed or Talon, are seeming pretty damn good. So, I'm hoping that these are some good indirect buffs to Zed. Again, once the patch finally hits, I'll test it out and find out, but I'm hoping for the best. There is also a buff happening to the Eye of Equinox or whatever the hell you pronounce it, which now gives you 10% CDR on the item just for an increased cost of 100 gold. I think this is definitely a worthy trade-off, and having 10% CDR is really good, especially for a lot of the support champions. So, not the biggest thing in the entire world in terms of what there is to talk about, but I thought I'd bring it up regardless. Following this, there's also a nerf happening to Hextech Gunblade, which I was talking about earlier, which will indirectly affect Katarina, will affect Akali, where now the damage scales with levels. So instead of just being a flat 250, it starts at 175 and then scales up to 250, I'm assuming, at level 18. So this one kind of sucks, but I do definitely agree with the changes because I feel like Hextech Gunblade has been way too strong of an item for way too long. Next up, we also have some nerfs happening to Redemption, which, let's be completely honest, the heal on this item was just completely ridiculously stupidly OP. There was just simply no reason for it to heal that much in an AoE area. So instead now, not only is the health lowered, but the mana regen has been increased, neither of which is the one that we really care about. Instead, the unique active effect where you have that big ass AoE heal, the heal value has been lowered to 40 plus 25 per level rather than 130 plus 20 per level. So hopefully this will put the item a bit more in line. I mean, it's a pretty big hit, but it should still be a fantastic item and still very useful. And the final nerf I want to talk about is towards the Mastery Courage of the Colossus, by far the best keystone for tanky champions and initiation champions bar none. So now instead, this item, if you hit someone when there's 5 people around you, it'll actually give you much bigger of a shield. But if you're doing it in a kind of a 1-on-1 scenario, or even a 1v2 scenario, or even a 1v3 scenario, it will not be as effective. But I believe anything 4 and above will make it actually even more OP. But at least this puts it in a scenario where if you do happen to land a CC with 5 enemy champions around you, you are rewarded with a pretty damn big ass shield. But if you're using it in a laning phase, in a 1-on-1 scenario, or in a 1-on-2 scenario, you can't just abuse this insanely ridiculous shield that it offers just from the base stats itself. But either way guys, I mean, that is about it for this video. There you have it, a bunch of huge changes coming to the next patch of patch 7.2. This video was a bit longer than I wanted it to be, but there was just so much things to cover. But if you guys did enjoy this video, then let me know by hitting that like button to show your support, subscribe if you haven't, check out my other videos as well. But I thank each and every one of you so much for watching, and I hope to see you for the next video. Peace.